I'm delighted to have with me today Eleonore from beworm. Welcome, Eleonore.
Thank you for having me.
Am I saying your name right?
Almost. It's Eleonore.
Oh, damn. Okay, Eleonore. It's Italian, right?
Yeah, actually, it is the German version of an Italian name. My parents thought it was funny to complicate my life even more by giving me the German version of an Italian name.
I like that. I like that. So you keep, how many times a day is your name said wrong on average?
Usually people call me Ele, so they get that one right.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So that's my strategy.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ele. You're from beworm. What is beworm?
beworm is a biotech startup based in Munich. We are a team of different kind of backgrounds. I'm an industrial designer and my co-founders are biologists. We have some management people in the team, and we are working on a novel recycling technology for plastics. To be specific, we're working on polyethylene plastics, which is the world's most commonly used plastic material. Everybody knows in the form of bags, foils, wrappings, and so on. So it's this often transparent packaging that you see a lot in the food industry and in your daily items. We're working with microorganisms that decompose that material to turn it again into raw material that can be reused in the petrochemical industry.
So we're back talking about plastics, one we've covered a couple of times, but you've got a very novel approach and you're sort of trying to leverage the power of nature, right? Like you're working out if there are enzymes in nature that can help break down plastic. Is that fair?
Exactly. So we've been looking at microorganisms that we isolated from a certain worm called waxworm. And these microorganisms produce enzymes that can attack plastics. We're not working only with these microorganisms, but also with others. And the end goal is to understand how microorganisms, so small living creatures, are able to attack plastic materials. And they usually do this by producing enzymes or proteins, which are like scissors that can cut the molecule of plastics into shorter fragments.
Because plastics are kind of long molecules.
Exactly. Plastics are, in our case, polyethylene is a long molecule composed of hydrogen and carbon. And you want to cut that in the middle, basically, where the strong CC bond is, to get out shorter fragments. But this can also be done with other plastics. Then you just need other enzymes to do the job.
So I first saw this in a news article. And actually, if I'm honest, it kind of upset me because I think what happens is we all are desperate for a breakthrough with plastic in that we see a lot of it in the natural environment and leakage, obviously, into the sea, etc., from landfill, whatever. And so as soon as there's kind of any kind of potential hope for an end to this, you see a lot of kind of articles and news around it. And they were kind of positioning it a bit like superworms are essentially going to digest plastic. Is that true?
No, that's not what really is happening. And I'm with you on this one. I also see a lot of news that are hyped a little bit too much. And this is really dangerous because plastic pollution is a really complex problem, and there will never be just one solution that saves it all. We have to come up with a system of solutions. We have to understand the whole complex value chain and interact in every point in order to fix it. So that's the first point. And then about the worms. So we also started with worms. We read a paper about plastic-eating waxworms, and we're starting experiments with the waxworms. But the thing is, the worm itself cannot be used on an industrial scale. It wouldn't make any sense, not efficiency-wise, and obviously not for any animal rights. So what you do is you try to understand why these worms, so for example, the waxworm or the mealworm or the superworm, are able to eat plastics and what enzymes are produced in their bodies in order that they can do this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's pretty amazing that a natural animal can somehow process it. Like, just because they can eat it, it probably doesn't mean they kind of want to eat it necessarily, I would guess. It's like if they're in a push or they can kind of eat their way through it. Like, do you know the origins of how this was discovered?
So there are several stories around this because there are several worms doing this for different kind of plastics. But the first paper that I read about this was from 2017 from an Italian researcher called Federica Bertocchini. And she is a hobby beekeeper. And she just, I don't know the exact story, but it was something like she took a honeycomb back home and she wrapped it into a plastic bag, and it was attacked by these waxworms. And then the waxworms actually started to eat the plastic bag. And this is how she started looking into it, because she's a biologist, and then she started working on this. And she's actually even on it until now, too.
Wow. So waxworms, basically in nature, they would find a beehive. They'd break down the wax that holds the honey inside, and then
Exactly.
eat that really nice high energy food source. I guess wax is kind of a bit plasticky in a way, isn't it?
It's a natural polymer, exactly. And actually, it's a big problem for beekeepers because they are invading the honeycombs and destroying everything there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's fascinating how they can break this bonds of the natural polymer. So this is why scientists thought that this might be the cause of them also being able to breaking synthetic polymer bonds.
Interesting.
And yeah, the funny thing about nature is that nature is always adapting and evolving.
Yeah.
So due to the fact that we have been polluting the environment for such a long time, there, I think right now over 300 microorganisms that can degrade plastics just because they develop this capacity. So for example, one of the first microorganisms that were discovered was a bacteria called Eleonore Eisath, and it was found on a Japanese PET landfill. And obviously it just learned how to use this material because it was living there. Mm-hmm. So that was what fascinates me so much about biology, and especially microbiology, how little creatures can adapt and just find strategies for surviving in the most unreal conditions.
Well, yeah, I mean, you only have to watch the nature documentaries to see that even in the most extreme places on Earth, there seems to be life. And as you say, it's always evolving. I think the challenge, I guess, is that evolution is used to millennia to evolve, and we're evolving, of course, too, and we have evolved. But it's like we're kind of outpacing with our consumption habits, I guess, as the speed that nature can evolve to kind of process things. And also, part of me thinks actually nature shouldn't have to process like foreign objects. And if we had a bit more of an attitude, which was one of stewardship of the world that we're kind of participants in, then, it would probably be better for us all because, it's a huge problem. But you're taking on this problem. And I'm kind of interested how you got to here. And in terms of you read this paper or this article about the waxworm in 2017. Can you tell everyone a bit about what your background is and, kind of how you grew up, why you took on industrial design as an area of interest, and then what kind of firmed your mind around tackling this particular challenge? So,
as we already teased in the beginning, I'm from Italy. I'm from the German-speaking part of Italy, so known as South Tyrol. Growing up in the Dolomites, so in one of the most beautiful areas probably in the world, I would say. I grew up in a really, really small mountain village, and I was always super close to nature. I grew up with a lot of animals. We have a little farm. I am passionate about mountains and everything that is outside. So it was always one of my core topics. So after I finished high school, I wasn't sure what I want to do with my life, as many people. And then I read about this studies that is called industrial design, and in the description of the study, of this course, it said it's focusing on problem solving. So this impressed me immediately. I was like, this. I want to be a problem solver. This sounds good. When I read this, I thought this would be the perfect fit for me because I almost wanted to do something creative but technical, and this is like the perfect combination of these two worlds. So I started studying industrial design first in Venice, and then I worked for some time as an industrial designer, but then in the actual job, I don't felt like I was solving any problems. I felt like I was making products for rich people to sell more stuff, and that made me feel really bad about myself, because I wanted to do this. I wanted to do something that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So I decided to go back to university, and I did my master's studies at the Technical University of Munich. And right in the first semester, they were asking us to do a speculative design project about the world's biggest problems. So I was like, yes, finally going back to the problem solving. And speculative design is a discipline in design where you look at technologies that don't exist yet, but you try to think them through. Like you try to imagine how these technologies that are not available yet could look like once they are available, right? So I was doing this project about plastic pollution, and I was reading, this was the first time I was reading this paper about the plastic-eating worms, and I just got hooked. So I just fell in love with the topic, and I thought like, oh, somebody really has to try to make this happen for real. Like
so that kind of clicked, right? So speculative design being like a project where you're essentially imagining what the future holds in a way, not trying to design with the tools and things you have now. And then this kind of landed on your lap in some way, and it just kind of resonated, I guess.
Yeah. So the power of speculative design is that you make it look real already. Mm-hmm. And this emphasizes your wish to make something happen. So there, you can also make it the other way around. For example, Black Mirror, a series that's probably a lot of people know, does it the other way around. They project technologies in the future and show a really negative version of the use of that technology or the potential use to scare people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Terminator was a good example of that, I think, and Elon Musk is doing a good job to remind us.
Right, exactly. So basically everything that is science fiction is also kind of speculative design. But you can do it in a way to make people dream and wish about something positive in the future too. So that's how the whole thing started. And then I dragged it along through my whole studies. I did several courses where I brought the topic up again. And then I was right in front of my master thesis, and I was thinking like, how can I sell an industrial design chair that I want to do experiments with worms? But yeah, somehow I made it happen. And in the meantime, I already had access to a lab where this was like a novel thing at the university, where you could do a course and then you could work there even though you wouldn't have the right, like the natural science background. Yeah, and during my master thesis, the experiments again turned out to be super interesting. I had some weight loss in the plastics, and I saw that the silk of the worms was changing and that there was definitely something happening. So I couldn't let go after. And after my studies, I was unsure if I should continue with this or I should get a proper job.
Yeah.
And actually had a really good offering on the table. But then I won a prize with the project, which gave me a little bit of money. And then I thought like, okay, now you just have to do it.
That was the universe telling you, carry on, stay the course, and
exactly.
Falling you into a false sense of security, like it was going to be easy, when in fact, building any company is super hard. Building probably a biotech in a emerging or kind of bleeding edge almost area, I can't imagine how tough that must be. But what a brilliant kind of opportunity, I guess, because it's interesting. If you look at some the geniuses like Einstein, they're able to kind of bridge fields and apply thinking in different ways, and so it's encouraging that technical university labs can be opened up to people with imaginations that aren't kind of put into a box around, you have to be a biochemist to even kind of make it into the room. But you must have, I guess, pretty technical team around you now. So how have you spun the company off from the university? How does it work? Did you set it up inside the university, and how did you make those first hires? And who was kind of the first hires for you in terms of like who are the team that are working on this problem, and what kind of skills do you need?
So the company is not an incorporated, fully spinned off company yet. This has several bureaucratic and also financial reasons, because we are still using university infrastructure. We are financed through a state grant, so yeah, it's a bit tricky in Germany to get the grants. So you're not allowed to be incorporated for most of the grants. So that's the reason why I have always to say we're still not fully spinned off.
Yep.
But the way it worked is that I just asked around if somebody knows a biologist. I had like little posters hanging up in the lab where I was doing my little experiments, and then I just so there were like evening events from the university where you could pitch your idea and look for co-founders. And one of my co-founders, I just found him like that. And the other one just heard about us by word of mouth. And then she also heard about us while she was doing her sword fighting course, because she was sword fighting against our lab, the head of the lab where we were working at, and he was telling her about it.
Is that like fencing? Is it
No, it's so she's into
actual sword fighting. Of course.
Yeah, of course she is, right? and she has a real heavy metal sword.
Okay. I mean, it's sounding eclectic, definitely, and it's sounding a fun place to be. But I'm hoping she doesn't bring her hobbies to work.
No, but sometimes we threat people that are not nice to us that she will bring it.
She's your leverage.
Yeah.
She's your fixer.
Sorry, just to finish that story. So basically, the only criteria for me was, are you a biologist and can you count till 10, and that's it. So, but I was super lucky, so I just bumped into the right people, and we teamed up, and then we did it alone for a long time, and then we discovered, we need a chair to support us, otherwise we cannot write any applications for grants. And then we were just walking around and asking random professors to be our mentor. And of course, most of them said no.
Yeah, terrified.
And then one of them said, if you manage to deliver something real, so if you manage to isolate a bacteria from this worm, then we can talk again.
Okay.
And then we went back to the lab, we went back to work, we extracted the gut of these worms and put it into a media where plastic was the only carbon source, and we did our homework. And then after, I think, a few weeks, we had something, and we just got back to his office with our bacteria and said, like, here's the bacteria, now you have to let us in.
So you actually saw results from adding the enzymes or the bacteria that was inside the worm's gut into some kind of media that had plastic molecules in as well, and you could see there was changes happening.
Exactly. So this is how we found our bacteria. So first we put the worms on the plastic diet for a really long time.
Okay.
So their gut system would adapt to the situation. And then we put out the guts and put the gut bacteria in the same situation. So we put them like in a habitat where there was no other food than plastics.
Okay.
And this led to the fact that only those who could really eat this plastic or attack this plastic could grow.
Okay.
And we did this several times. And with this system, we picked over 40 strains, and we even found a novel bacteria. And now we're looking at this bacteria to find out which enzymes they're producing, because the enzyme is not a living organism. The enzyme is just the mechanism of their degradation, right?
Yeah. So let's quick primer on enzymes. Enzymes normally they're chemical, and they speed things up, don't they? Like catalysts, they like convert things. So I mean, we have enzymes. I guess every creature has enzymes in their guts and stuff.
Yeah, it's the same. So if you think about people that are lactose intolerant.
Yep.
This means that in their bodies or in their digestion system, they're missing an enzyme called lactase.
Right.
And this enzyme is produced by gut bacteria, usually.
Okay. You're studying the worms, but you're trying to study the bacteria inside the guts of the worm. And it varies from worm to worm. Oh, well, specifically in worms that you have been obviously providing a only plastic diet to some time for, so that the as you say, things are changing or things are happening. But is this trying to find one in a million worms or that has a good enzyme, or is it kind of similar from worm to worm?
So there are different approaches. We're also looking at the whole worm because, for example, this original researcher, she found out that also in the worm's salvia there was enzymes that could attack polyethylene. Mm-hmm. So we're still looking at the whole worm, but we are more focused on the gut bacteria. And we have to say that this is our gut bacteria because our worm was on a plastic diet for a really, really long time. And obviously that changes your digestion and your guts, how you say, the way the gut is composed changes a lot when you eat something for a really long time. It's right. Also in humans, it's the same thing. If you would eat, bananas for a year, mm-hmm. You would probably die. But let's say if you would eat one single thing for a really long time, mm-hmm. then it changes your whole system, right? Your whole gut bacteria, who is present, who's less present, and so on. So you can influence that a lot and push it into a certain direction. So it's forced evolution, basically. Breeding is the same thing, right? If you see, for example, that a specific feature in the worm would be really attractive. Let's say you want worms that have a long tail, let's say. Mm-hmm. Then you pick the ones with the long tail and you try to get as far as possible with them, right? So they develop long, even longer tails and so on. And this is the same logic. You go on with the worms that can survive on the plastic diet as long as possible. Mm-hmm. Then you take the gut bacteria and do the same thing with the gut bacteria. And then at the end of the day, you have the best performers. And
so you've been doing this process now for some time, and you're starting to see encouraging results.
Yeah, what we see is, so the tricky thing in this whole research field is that there is no standards analysis method. So usually in research, there is assays that everybody knows about, that are common, and that everybody agrees about. And if you have these methods, it's super easy to detect what's happening. But for plastic degradation, there is no standard assay. So what we had to do in order to detect whether something is happening or not, to do a bunch of different analysis. So we did Raman spectroscopy, we did GCMS, different kind of chemical analysis. Mm-hmm. Of course, we also looked at the weight of the plastic and the weight of the bacteria and how that changed. And with all these methods combined, and for example, also the oxidation that we saw on the surface, it's pretty not clear, but it's pretty, it's leading us into the direction that there is really something happening there. And this combined with all the results from other researchers, we can say almost for sure that plastic degradation is happening with these microorganisms, and we just need to speed it up.
Okay.
But there is still a lot of question marks in this whole research field, because as I said, this is quite a novel research field. It's maybe been 20 years, which sounds a lot, but it's not a lot in research. Mm-hmm. And especially in polyethylene degradation, it's us and a bunch of other teams in the world, and that's it. And we also interact with each other because we want to push each other, because it's so difficult. It's such a difficult research topic. So we have to, the more we can interact with others, the better it is, actually, because then we can be quicker.
Yeah, and so this community, obviously, you're joining forces in some respects and kind of sharing information and trying to accelerate this. What's the vision of for you and for the community around how this actually works? In terms of what's the big payback if you can replicate this enzyme and produce this enzyme at scale, how will it fit in the whole universe of like plastic circularity? I mean, should I call it that? I mean, because the problem with plastic is it's not circular, and I've seen, and we've chatted even on this show to interesting founders who are taking different approaches, and some people just talk about recycling. Recycling is the way forward. Others talk about bioplastics or ways of getting rid of it or whatever. So how do you see it? How do you see this playing out? Because we have a massive problem. Can really the gut of a worm play a meaningful a role in fixing this moving forward?
Yes, it can. Because in order to reach circularity, what we need to do is to get to the point where we get valuable raw material out of plastics. What is happening right now is that a part of the plastics, unfortunately a really small part, is mechanically recycled, and this almost always leads to downcycling, because you're just doing a physical process where you shred the plastic up, you melt it again, and you redo it, right?
So downcycling is basically you end up with worse and worse material, or less and less
every cycle the quality gets worse. I have to say that for some materials, mechanical recycling is the best solution right now. Mm-hmm. For example, for clear PET bottles.
Yeah.
It is the best thing that we have right now, and we should definitely keep going. But for other things, for example, for mixed plastic, colored plastic, contaminated plastic, it doesn't work at all. It either doesn't work at all, or it leads to like downcycling. So you can maybe do one cycle, max two, and then it's done, and then you have to burn it anyways.
Yeah, and countries are basically disposing of it by passing the problem on to poorer countries, and exactly. with less regulation, and doing pretty nefarious and not very nice things. And it usually ends up either incinerated or in the environment in some way. Yeah,
I mean, it's incredible that we use the same tactics for plastics that we did when we were teenagers and we were supposed to clean our room. We just hide it away and hope that mom's not discovering it, kind of. I feel like that's what the whole world is doing there. Let's just hide it and pretend it's not there. Anyways, so what biocatalytic and also other methods of raw material recycling are doing, though, is that they're breaking down the molecule. So you're going back to the beginning, basically. You're generating new virgin-like raw materials out of a used material. It's like you would have a table and you would turn it back into a tree. Mm-hmm. You can do everything with virgin-like raw material. And that's kind of the holy grail in plastic recycling, because once we understand how to do that, then we can make plastics really circular. Of course, we have to do a bunch of other things, like design for recycling, using less materials, making things less complicated, and so on. But still, this is a crucial piece in this whole puzzle that would change things a lot. And this is the first step. And the second step is, once you really understand this natural degradation mechanisms and you have enzymes that you can maybe also use in natural habitats, you can start cleaning up polluted environments. But the first step and the most important step is to understand how the degradation works and then make it more efficient. And the way it will work is in a bioreactor. So you just have to imagine a big bioreactor where the enzymes are inside. Mm-hmm. And you throw in the plastics. And the interesting thing about enzymes is that they are substrate specific, which means that they only attack the material that they're supposed to attack. So if you have mixed materials, for example, which is one of the main problems, the enzyme will attack only the one material that you want to be that is decomposed. So that's one really interesting approach about plastic recycling, periodic recycling. And then the other thing is that it is really energy efficient, or it's thought to be energy efficient, because enzymes are, as you said before, natural catalysts, and they don't need a lot of external energy or anything. They just need a certain media and a certain temperature that is stable, but usually it's not like 500 degrees, but maybe 30 degrees or 40 degrees. Yeah. And then they work. while the other method of raw material recycling is chemical recycling. So it's the same concept, but with chemical reactions. And usually that requires a lot of temperature, high temperature, and high pressure.
Right. And of course, where you have that, you need a lot of energy. And energy at the moment is mostly still from fossil fuels. So it's kind of like burning fossil fuels to try and recycle fossil fuels.
So to sum up the benefits of biotic recycling is you avoid the use of fossil fuels because you're going back to the raw material. You save a lot of energy. You do a natural process. You can address plastics that are currently not being addressed because they don't fit in the current system. And in the future, you might also be able to use it to clean up the environment. So it's a pretty attractive technology.
Yeah, I can understand why it sucked you in to this, opportunity when you had a sort of personal quest to kind of find a really meaningful opportunity to sink your teeth into. And boy, I mean, this is a really exciting and interesting space. I think, what are you kind of looking for right now? Like, do you think it's an aha moment, or is it kind of evolutionary kind of thing where you just have to keep doing more and more of what you're doing and basically increasing your, I guess, resources and your collaboration with others in terms of trying to produce this an enzyme, I guess, that you can commercialize, or that you can in some way replicate at scale, I guess, is needed. Is that what you're working on?
Yeah. So we're looking at both. We're looking at either the enzymatic scale up or fermentation. So keeping it in the bacteria might also be an option, because, for example, if the degradation process turns out to be a combination of enzymes, which is quite probable, then it might be easier to keep it in the bacteria, because then you have your little factory there already. But that's all questions that we have to clarify along the way. The enzymatic approach is the more known one in a scalable, going through a scale up. So it might do a combination. We'll see. What we really need to do right now is to speed up our game. So we need more people in the lab. This is why we're also looking into a pre-seed funding round now, because we need to have as many samples as possible working at the same time. We are already doing a lot of things in parallel. So we are combining our bacteria to find the best mix. We are looking into the enzymes a bit more. We are working on this degradation standard assay to have the testing going quicker. There's still a lot of work to do, and I feel like now the dynamics in these fields are changing. So now the first competitors are popping up, and it's time to speed up, let's say.
Okay, there's other worms on the block, and you need to move faster. So you're basically.
But it's good. I'm happy about that, because of course I'm a little bit afraid that somebody will be quicker, but on the other hand, for me it's about solving the problem in the first place, and there is so much plastics out there. I think there's enough space for 10 PE degrading companies.
I think I don't think the size of the pie is the problem, if you know what I mean, like the terms of the size of the problem, the size of the market to go after. The question is really around how you make solutions that fit into our existing systems, and which markets you choose and which approaches. There must be just 1,000 different decisions on this, but I only have a couple more questions for you. I want to know, who is Super Steve? And because I've seen him mentioned, because you have a podcast as well, right? You have a plastic podcast. So what's that? Tell us about that.
So our podcast is called the Plastics Pop-Up Podcast. You can watch it on YouTube or just on the regular podcast platforms. So this podcast is one of our goals is also to educate people about plastic pollution and everything that has to do with it. So we have this really short 10 minutes thing that you can just watch in your coffee break, where we explain a few common myths about plastics or about the recycling industry. And it's just like an easygoing, quick thing that people can watch. And Super Steve is our bacteria that we discovered. So the story is that Verena, my co-founder, she's a microbiologist, and she had all our strains in the lab, and as I said, we like to to interact with other researchers, but we also don't want to give away our secrets, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, what is our strategy if people ask us for the strain names? And Verena was just like saying, I just call all my bacteria Steve, so nobody will know. And then she found this one bacteria that didn't have any match in a data bank, so that we basically discovered. Mm-hmm. And she was like, oh, he's the best of all Steve, so this is Super Steve.
So Super Steve is your kind of your own internal IP like name of your bacteria, and Verena is she Chief Bacteria Officer? Is that correct, or is that just a bit of? Yeah. I've never actually met a Chief Bacteria Officer before. But I hope to one day. Okay, so Super Steve was part of, I guess, it was a major breakthrough then, or a special moment. Yeah,
it was a special moment, and he's also going to be part of our first patent. So yeah, we're happy to have him. Currently, he's hanging out in the lab with his friends, because we also found out. As bacteria do. We also found out that he's happier when he has a certain friend around. But yeah, I cannot specify more on that, because then it's going to get too much into the IP. But as you can see, we're having fun with bacteria. Yeah, you are. You're having fun with bacteria and fun with worms. I had a quick look on your website before I started this call. You can adopt a worm for Christmas on your website. So tell us about that. Yeah, I mean, so as you might have guessed, our research is super capital intense. We need a lot of money, and it's hard to get a lot of money. And people asked us, how can I support? And then we came up with this idea that they can just adopt one of our worms and give it a name, get a certificate, and get featured on our Worm Wall of Fame for the sake of science. And so if you don't know what to give for Christmas to your loved ones, I think having a worm is really special. I think I'm definitely gonna do it, and I'm gonna video the reaction of my wife as I give her an adopted worm for Christmas. You don't actually get the worm, just to be clear, right? It's a bit like when you adopt an orangutan, you're kind of basically paying towards the upkeep of that animal rather than taking it away with you. So, but you get to name it, and you could be. And you get a certificate. You get a certificate. Certificates are very important, extremely important. And so that can go up on the wall. It's a nice thing to have in the backdrop when you're on a Zoom call. And could be helping contribute to fixing one of the biggest problems we've got in the world. Should beworm basically come forward and find these fantastic bacteria and enzymes that can really play a significant role in making plastics more circular, which I think would definitely be a good outcome. So look, we need worms as much as we need tigers and giraffes and all the other animals. So why not adopt a worm? I love it, and I love the creativity. It reminds me a bit of Airbnb when they were getting going. They were kind of they ended up doing Obama O's, like this cereal, and I can't remember, what was it, Captain McCain or kind of cereal as well, when there was the race between Obama and McCain for president, and I think they made a load of money with that, and that's one of the reasons the VCs invested in, because they could see they could hustle. So I think it bodes very well for you, Ellie, and thanks a lot for sharing more. How should people get in contact with you? Obviously, we'll put details in the show notes to your LinkedIn and stuff like that. Is that the best way? Yeah, that's the best way. And you can always just write me an email to Eleonore@beworm.org, or visit our website, write me on LinkedIn, whatever you wish to do. And I just want to add to what you just said, is that you should never underestimate the power of creativity. And I think this is our secret superpower. We might not be the typical science team, but we have creativity on our side. Indeed. And never underestimate the power of nature either, because the answers are right there in front of us. So that's right. Thank you so much for joining and for taking us through this crazy bacterial bioengineering world. And I really want to keep in touch and be one of the first to hear when this starts becoming commercialized. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and good luck to the whole beworm team. Thank you, and thanks